Welcome to a new episode of Animal Quests. Today, we're uncovering 6 of the most dangerous and fatal shark attacks on humans. Sit tight, and let's dive straight into the first story. On the morning of August 12, 1993, David Miles and 4 close friends set out for a day of abalone diving along the northern coast of California. This was a familiar routine for the group. Every few weeks, they would make the trip to these coastal waters, not only for the adventure and camaraderie, but also for the opportunity to gather abalone, a prized shellfish that could earn them extra money when sold to local markets. As they waded into the cool water, the sun cast a golden hue over the rugged coastline, adding to the sense of promise the day held. With their dive tube floating alongside them as a safety marker, the group swam out from the shore. Laughter and conversation filled the air as they prepared for the dive. They dove beneath the waters, and for about 30 minutes, David and his friends explored beneath the surface, each heading in their own direction and occasionally surfacing for air. The clear water revealed patches of rocky terrain below, where they hoped to spot the distinctive shells of abalone. Moving effortlessly through the water, the group explored at their own pace. As the others ventured farther out, David decided to circle around a large rock formation that caught his eye. He carefully scanned the crevices for abalone, but after a few moments of searching, he realized there was nothing noteworthy. With a calm kick of his fins, he began to ascend toward the surface, ready to regroup. While ascending, David was captivated by the underwater scenery, distracted by the swaying kelp and the flicker of fish darting between rocks. His mind wandered as he took in the serene beauty around him, unaware of the danger lurking nearby. Suddenly, without warning, he was violently struck from behind, jolting him out of his peaceful reverie. A massive great white shark, estimated to be 18 to 20 feet long, lunged at David. The shark swallowed him head first, its jaws closing around his head and shoulders. David could feel his head inside the shark's mouth and could even see light filtering through the shark's teeth. The shark bit down again, now grabbing him past his shoulder blades. David stayed motionless, fearing that if he struggled, the shark would thrash and tear him apart. In a stroke of luck, the shark opened its jaws briefly. David took his chance, pushing himself free from the shark's mouth. His adrenaline surged, and he frantically swam 30 yards to a nearby rock formation. He discarded his weight belt to swim faster, desperately trying to get out of the water before the shark attacked again. Luckily, he made it to the rock formation and climbed out of the water. He screamed for help, his voice carrying over the waves. Mike Swartzel, one of David's closest friends, surfaced for air after his dive and was the first to hear the desperate cries. Looking toward the rocks, he spotted David in clear distress. Without hesitation, Mike swam toward him, reaching the rocks where David had pulled himself out of the water. Within minutes, the whole group was gathered on the rock, fully aware of the gravity of the situation. One of David's friends brought the dive tube with him, knowing it would be crucial for their return. David's injuries were severe, and time was of the essence. The shark had bitten through his scalp, leaving multiple lacerations on his head and neck, and his back was laid open with deep wounds, as if by a fillet knife. They knew they had to get David back to shore quickly, but he was terrified to re-enter the water. After 30 agonizing minutes of convincing him, the friends decided to make the dangerous swim back, even though the shark was still active nearby. They jumped back into the water, using the dive tube for support as they made their way toward the shore. David, weakened by blood loss and slipping into shock, clung to the tube while Mike pulled him along, all the while painfully aware that the shark could return at any moment. As they swam, David became increasingly lethargic, and Mike feared his friend might lose consciousness before they could reach safety. Still, they pressed forward, determined to get David to shore. Fortunately, they were not attacked again, and they finally made it back to the beach. The beach was located beneath a large cliff, making access difficult. David had to be airlifted from the shore by a Coast Guard helicopter and transported to Mendocino Coast Hospital in Fort Bragg. His injuries were severe, requiring more than 100 stitches to close, but miraculously, he survived. Later, in an interview, David described his experience as akin to winning the lottery. and I think we can all agree, this truly was a life-or-death lottery that David was incredibly fortunate to win. On the afternoon of July 21, 1993, Michael Henderson and his family set out for what they thought would be a peaceful day of sailing along the northern coast of Port Stephens, Australia. Sailing had always been a cherished family activity, and Michael, his wife Laura, and their 12-year-old son Jacob often took to the sea during the warm summer months. It was a way for them to escape the busyness of life and enjoy each other's company amidst the beauty of the ocean. The family enjoyed their day. They sailed along the coastline, taking in the rugged cliffs and blue expanse of the Pacific. As the afternoon wore on and the sun climbed higher, the temperature began to rise. The heat from the midday sun made the air heavy, and Jacob, eager to cool off, asked his parents if he could swim. It was then that the family decided to anchor the boat near a quiet cove. The spot was ideal, secluded with deep, inviting waters that stretched around 12 feet below the surface. Michael and Laura, though aware of the ocean's unpredictability, saw no immediate danger and agreed to let Jacob swim, but reminded him to stay close to the boat. Jacob, full of energy and excitement, wasted no time. He dove into the water, relishing the cool relief. He swam about 50 feet from the side of the boat. His parents, watching from the deck, were reassured after a few minutes when nothing seemed amiss. They began to relax, trusting everything was safe, sitting on the deck and enjoying the warmth of the sun. After about 15 minutes in the water, Jacob, having taken several cool dives and feeling refreshed, began to swim back toward the boat. His strokes were steady and unhurried, his body cutting smoothly through the water. Suddenly, without warning, Jacob felt an immense pressure clamp around his right thigh. His body was yanked downward as a great white shark, estimated to be 18 feet long, surged up from the depths and bit into his upper right leg, just above the knee. The first thing his parents heard was a sharp, piercing scream, Jacob's. It cut through the peaceful afternoon like a siren. They rushed to the side of the boat, and what they saw was horrifying. Jacob was thrashing violently in the water, his body jerking as he fought to break free. Beneath him, the shark's dark body was partially visible. Without a second thought, Michael dove into the water, his only focus on reaching Jacob. The shark had already bitten down on Jacob's leg and released him, leaving deep wounds. It was now circling around him, as though preparing to strike again. Michael swam with all his strength. Reaching Jacob, Michael grabbed him and with all his strength began pushing him toward the boat. The shark was still circling below. Jacob, bleeding heavily and barely able to swim, reached the side of the boat with Michael's help. Laura, positioned at the edge, pulled Jacob onto the deck. Just as she hoisted him over the railing, the shark shifted its focus. Michael, still in the water, and just feet from the boat, became the shark's next target. In a terrifying instant, the great white lunged upward. The shark's massive jaws clamped down on Michael's torso, dragging him under with brutal force. The attack was swift, the water churning as the shark pulled him beneath the surface. Blood filled the water, and before Laura or Jacob could react, Michael had disappeared beneath the waves. Shaking with fear, Laura scrambled to the boat's radio and sent out a desperate distress call. Jacob lay on the deck, slipping in and out of consciousness from the blood loss. Minutes later, a nearby vessel arrived to assist. Jacob was rushed to shore for emergency medical treatment, where his leg, requiring 87 stitches, was treated. He survived the attack. Despite search efforts, Michael's body was never recovered, lost to the deep waters off Port Stephens. In the following days, an investigation confirmed that the shark was a large great white. Increased shark activity had been reported in the area, but the family had been unaware of the danger lurking beneath the surface. Laura and Jacob were heartbroken by the loss of a loving father and devoted husband. The weight of the tragedy would stay with them forever as they struggled to move forward despite the pain. Laura Bennett, a 28-year-old from Boulder, Colorado, was on vacation in Cancun, Mexico, with her volleyball team. Besides being a nurse in her daily life, volleyball was her passion, and she spent much of her free time playing matches. She loved her team, and this vacation was meant to be a fun getaway to enjoy the sun, play volleyball, and strengthen the bond between teammates. On February 12, 2011, the second day of their retreat, they had a great day. Late in the afternoon, they finished a volleyball game on the beach. While everyone else left to return to the resort, Laura decided to stay behind for a quick swim, while her friends headed back. The day was perfect, sunny, tropical, and carefree with no sign of danger. Unbeknownst to Laura, staff nearby had spotted 2 bull sharks that afternoon. They were on jet skis trying to search for the sharks and steer them away from the tourists. At the same time, they had just begun warning tourists on the beach to stay out of the water. But with many people spread out, it was difficult to notify everyone in time. They managed to divert one shark, but the other remained close to shore. Laura, unaware of the lurking threat, entered waist-deep water, about 3 feet deep, to wash off the sand from the volleyball game and cool off after hours of playing. As she rinsed off the sand absent-mindedly, she noticed people on jet skis waving at her and shouting in Spanish. They were too far away for her to understand what they were saying, and she mistook their gestures for friendly waves. Smiling, she waved back, feeling carefree and relaxed, unaware they were frantically trying to warn her of danger. Just as she continued splashing water on her legs, she suddenly felt something large and slimy brush hard against her left leg. Confused, she looked down and was horrified to see a bull shark clamp its powerful jaws around her thigh. At first, the shock numbed her and the pain didn't register immediately. But as the shark tightened its grip, a searing pain shot through her leg, triggering her survival instinct. She kicked and thrashed violently, trying to free herself. The shark suddenly released her leg, probably due to the trashing, giving her a moment for escape. Struggling to stay upright, Laura knew she had to get to shore. She fought against the pain and exhaustion, trying to push herself through the water. But just as she thought she was making headway, the predator returned with terrifying speed. This time, the shark struck from the side, its jaws latching onto her right arm. With whatever strength she had left, Laura used her left hand to strike at the shark's nose repeatedly, her blows becoming weaker with each strike. After several agonizing moments, the shark finally let go, retreating into the blood-stained waters for good. Now bleeding heavily and in shock, Laura struggled to stay on her feet, fighting to reach the shore. The staff on jet skis and those who had been warning people on shore immediately sprang into action as panic spread across the beach. The jet ski operators jumped into the shallow water, while the onshore lifeguards rushed toward Laura to help. The entire beach, now aware of the danger, watched in stunned silence as the rescue unfolded. Once on shore, Laura, despite the overwhelming pain and shock, assessed her situation with a nurse's instinct. With a shaky voice, she directed those around her on how to apply pressure to her wounds to slow the bleeding. Thanks to her quick instructions, she was able to prevent further blood loss until emergency services arrived. She was rushed to hospital in Cancun, where doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize her. Laura had lost a significant amount of blood, around 30 to 40%, but the timely intervention of the jet ski operators and her own medical knowledge helped prevent even greater damage. After a long recovery process, including multiple surgeries, she managed to keep both limbs, though she faced significant challenges in regaining functionality due to the severity of her injuries. On the morning of May 14, 2024, Simon Bacanello, a 46-year-old teacher from the small town of Elliston, South Australia, set out for a day of surfing at Walker's Rock Beach. The sky was clear, the waves that morning were steady, powerful, and just the right height, and the air buzzed with the excitement of the young surfers who joined him. Everything seemed perfect for a day on the water. Simon Bacanello wasn't just a teacher to the students of Elliston. He was a mentor, a friend, and a steady influence on their lives. As he watched the students paddle out, he was filled with a sense of pride and peace. He had seen many of them grow up, and now they were enjoying the sea that he had so often taught them to respect. The day began with optimism, a close-knit community sharing the simple joy of surfing under clear skies. But what followed was an unimaginable tragedy, transforming a peaceful morning into one of heartbreak. Around 10 a.m., as Simon and the group ventured further into the water, a nearby surfer who was packing his board into his car after a successful morning noticed something alarming: a large shark moving among the surfers. Alarmed by the dark shape cutting through the waves so close to the surfers, he began honking his car horn, trying to warn them. Simon, who was just about 50 feet into the water, saw the students had just begun catching waves. He heard the honking, initially confused, and scanned the horizon. Nothing seemed out of place at first, but the honking continued, and now people on the shore were waving frantically. Fully aware of the potential dangers, including sharks, he immediately started calling out to the students, urging them to return to shore swiftly but calmly. He knew he had to stay composed. Any sign of panic could make the situation even worse. While most of the students were nearing the shore, their feet finally touching the sand, Simon stayed behind in the deeper waters to ensure the last few made it safely. Just as the final student reached the beach, Simon, still in the water, felt a powerful blow from behind. It was the shark. Its jaws clamped down on his right leg. Desperate to break free, he twisted and struck the shark's nose, hoping to force it to release its grip. The enormous predator briefly let go, only to attack again, this time latching onto his left arm as he fell from his surfboard. Simon fought back, striking at the relentless creature, but a third and final attack pulled him under, the water turning red as he vanished beneath the surface. On shore, the students, having watched the entire attack in horror, began screaming, with some even attempting to run back into the water to help. Their panicked cries echoed across the beach, but distraught beachgoers rushed forward, holding them back from returning to the danger. Others frantically called for help, helpless as they witnessed the tragedy unfold. Eventually, volunteers and emergency responders arrived and initiated an extensive search. For hours, they scoured the waters and shoreline, but all that was found were fragments of Simon's surfboard and parts of his wetsuit, tragic remnants of a life cut short. Following the search, an investigation confirmed that Simon had been attacked by a great white shark. Bite marks on the recovered surfboard and witness accounts supported this conclusion. The beach was closed in the aftermath as authorities monitored the area for further shark activity and ensured the safety of the community. It was June 10th, 2024, and Tommy Johnson, a curious 10-year-old boy, was on vacation with his family at Coral Cove Marine Park, a popular ocean-themed adventure destination. Tommy had always been fascinated by the ocean, and this trip was all he could talk about for weeks. The highlight of the park was the famous Walk with the Giants experience, an underwater adventure that let visitors trek through a massive shark tank. The Walk with the Giants allowed guests to wear specially designed air helmets and walk along the bottom of a giant aquarium surrounded by sharks and other marine life. It was a chance to get up close with the ocean's most feared predators in their own environment, all while being safely guided by professionals. With wide-eyed excitement, Tommy convinced his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, to let him participate. His parents, always protective, hesitated at first but eventually gave in, confident that the park's reputation and safety protocols would keep their son safe. So Tommy's dream finally came true. As the heavy helmet designed to supply air was placed on his head, his parents watched nervously. The helmet allowed him to walk underwater in the shark tank, alongside a group of other participants. The moment Tommy descended into the tank, he was mesmerized. The enormous Caribbean reef sharks swam gracefully around them, their sleek, agile bodies moving through the water like shadows. Among the group, Tommy was the smallest, his eyes wide with wonder as he walked, carefully placing each step on the sandy tank floor. From above, Mrs. Johnson's view was crystal clear. She could see her son moving among the sharks. Mr. Johnson stood beside her, more relaxed but keeping a close eye on Tommy as well. At first, everything was magical. The sharks, known for their usually calm demeanor, glided by with little more than a glance at the visitors. But then, something changed. One of the sharks, a 6-foot-long Caribbean reef shark, suddenly turned toward Tommy. It was curious, perhaps confused by the boy's small stature and the unfamiliar movement of the helmet. The shark nudged Tommy gently at first, causing him to stumble in the sand. Tommy tried to regain his balance, but in that moment of confusion, the shark lashed out and bit his leg. Above, Mrs. Johnson's heart stopped as she saw a cloud of blood fill the water around her son. Her scream tore through the air, a desperate, gut-wrenching cry that echoed across the viewing deck. The crowd around her froze in shock, eyes wide in horror. Before anyone could react, Mr. Johnson leaped into action. Without a second thought, he jumped into the tank, disregarding the fact that he wasn't equipped with the necessary gear. Inside the tank, the shark, after its initial bite, quickly swam off, leaving Tommy alone. Mr. Johnson reached his son in seconds, his instincts overriding any fear. He grabbed Tommy and pulled him to the surface where the park staff were already mobilizing. They swiftly assisted in getting Tommy out of the water and applied immediate first aid. Tommy was rushed to the nearest hospital, his leg injured but treatable. The doctors worked swiftly, cleaning and stitching the wound. Despite the severity of the situation, Tommy remained brave throughout and survived the attack. In the aftermath, an investigation into the incident was launched. Coral Cove Marine Park implemented enhanced safety measures to prevent such accidents from happening again, including stricter rules about the proximity of sharks to guests. However, the attraction did not close. In fact, the adrenaline rush of walking with sharks, even with the known risks, continued to draw thrill seekers from all over. It was a bright, sunny day on February 4th, 2023, in Perth, Australia. While many people flocked to the busy beaches, some sought out the quieter riverbanks for a more peaceful escape. Among them was 16-year-old Stella Berry, a vibrant and adventurous teenager who was always at the heart of the fun. Stella and her friends had chosen to spend the afternoon at the Swan River, a serene spot not far from her home in Perth, to cool off from the summer heat. Music played softly from a nearby speaker. Stella's friends were drawn to her lively energy, and she loved making every moment memorable. That day was no different, as the group enjoyed the peaceful atmosphere and carefree afternoon by the river. As the afternoon unfolded, the group relaxed by the riverbank, chatting and enjoying the warmth after having taken a few refreshing swims earlier. After a while, Stella, with her deep love for animals, especially dolphins, spotted a pod gliding gracefully through the water, their fins slicing through the river's surface. The rare and captivating sight filled her with excitement, and she couldn't resist the urge to get closer. With a burst of energy, Stella stood up, stepping carefully over the smooth stones that dipped into the water. Her friends watched with curiosity and amusement as she made her way to the river's edge. Without hesitation, she jumped in, splashing into the cool water, determined to get a closer look at the dolphins. The river's gentle current began pulling her farther out, but Stella swam with excitement, her eyes fixed on the playful creatures in the distance. Her friends cheered her on from the shore, laughing as she splashed ahead, eager to reach the dolphins. Then, without warning, she felt a sharp, excruciating pain in her leg. Something had clamped down on her. At first, Stella was lightly panicked and started thrashing, trying to kick herself free from whatever was causing the pain. But the more she struggled, the worse it became. The creature gripping her leg wouldn't let go, and her thrashing seemed only to aggravate it. It was then that a bull shark appeared beneath her, its massive form shifting ominously in the water. Realizing the danger, Stella screamed for help. Some of her friends instinctively moved toward the water but stopped, knowing they couldn't get too close without putting themselves in harm's way. The shark tightened its grip, pulling her under for a moment before releasing its hold. The water around her turned red as Stella's leg was torn open. She surfaced, gasping for breath, and continued to fight her way back toward the shore. Nearby, a man who had been enjoying the afternoon heard the commotion and quickly jumped into the water. As Stella's friends stood helpless on the shore, too afraid to approach due to the danger, the man swam toward her with urgency. Fortunately, the shark had already started retreating, giving him the chance to reach her. He managed to pull Stella to shore, but by the time they reached the riverbank, she was already unconscious. It didn't look good for Stella, and despite the best efforts of those around her, the situation was becoming more desperate by the second. Paramedics arrived quickly, and they worked to stop the bleeding, applying pressure to the wounds and attempting to stabilize her. Despite their best efforts, the damage was too severe. Stella's injuries were fatal, and she passed away shortly after the paramedics arrived. The incident shocked the local community. Bull sharks are one of the few shark species that can thrive in both freshwater and saltwater, making rivers like the Swan River a part of their territory. Authorities issued warnings to the public, urging swimmers to stay out of the river while they searched for the shark. A day later, a 8.2-foot bull shark was captured about 0.6 miles from the attack site. With the help of local fishermen, the shark was caught and relocated far from the river. The community mourned Stella Berry, remembering her as a kind, fun-loving teenager with a bright future ahead of her. Those were the 6 most fatal shark attacks on humans. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. It really supports the channel. Stay cautious out there in the water, and we'll see you in the next episode.